The end of a short story, which is a kind of unusual thing to do in a reading, but it sort of makes sense because the project was all about sort of what happens, in a sense, what happens when the lights go out. And I was in a restaurant in London called Dans le Noir. Has anyone been there? No?
No.
Okay. The thing about this particular restaurant is that everything is in the darkness. It's in absolute pitch darkness. It's not darkness like you go into a room or a bedroom at night and it's sort of gloomy. You cannot see anything at all. And it's extraordinary how that changes your perception of the world quite quickly. The food is pretty good, actually, bizarrely, so I would really recommend it. It's a very interesting thing to do. And I went there with my wife, and the following is not, and I repeat, not what happened. But it did give me the idea. All you need to know is that Max is the waiter. He happens to be blind, which of course makes no difference in there at all. In fact, it confers something of an advantage. The story's called Blackout, by the way. Max announced himself with a quiet cough and asked if he could take the plates. Was anything wrong? He asked, feeling from the weight that the desserts were untouched. No, everything was fine. I said, we'll just get the bill, please. I said it firmly. I hope this might be a signal to Mel. Max ghosted off. And then, Mel continued, and then something happened. Something happened, and it went really dark, properly dark. The lights went off all over Singapore. Power cut, lightning strike, I don't know. I couldn't see anything at all. I reached out for the balcony rail. It felt as if I could just lean forward and a little further and a little further, and then I might just slip out into that soft, warm darkness. Darkness that would wrap around me as I fell into the blackness, onto whatever was waiting for me below. The pool, the concrete, heaven, hell, or just nothing. It didn't matter. The lights went off just to let me do that, alone, at peace, naked as the day I was born. It would have been perfect, don't you think? Mel's words now seemed to be things, almost tangible, floating in the space between us. I could have reached out and caught them, felt their weight as they burned in my hands, known the anguish and torment that they held within them, the fury. 20 years in the forging, they were there for me, unheard until now, but always mine. I knew there was something expected of me, but I was helpless, dumbstruck, dragged down with her into the pit, my heart weighed down by a ballast of cold grey lead. You see, despite what had happened all those years before, or perhaps even because of what happened, this was a woman that I loved. In my naivety, I thought I'd been forgiven, and that Mel's forgiveness had shown me what it really meant to love someone. I thought I understood, but I was wrong. I hadn't been forgiven at all. So I panicked. My pupils wildly scanned the blackness, wide open and thirsting for light. All they found was that red, tiny, accusing dot. I stared at it for a few seconds. I struggled to focus and realised that my vision was blurry with tears. I shut my eyes, but the little dot was still there, dancing wildly. And what happened? I forced the question out. She was expecting it. She wanted it. It would be her cue. Well, I didn't jump, she said, the irony heaving in her voice. Nothing happened at all. I realised I was drunk and that you weren't worth it anyway. So I swigged down the rest of the Bacardi. I regretted it and I made myself sick in the bathroom. Then I came back to bed. I stared into the absolute darkness until I fell asleep. That was falling too, like I imagined it would have been. And now, I wondered, now what? At least I understood why she had chosen this evening. But what did it mean? Was I supposed to say something more, to apologise for these new details, specifically, to acknowledge how close I had been to losing her forever? Either over the balcony rail or in some other way. What was I supposed to do with all this? Was it all over now, or was it just beginning? Words would not mean anything now in any case. I had to find some other way to reach her. I pushed my hand slowly across the table, past my wine tumbler, past the salt cellar I'd tried and failed to locate earlier. There was Mel's fork. I pushed it gently. Gently, I thought. But it fell off the table and unguessed into her lap. Sorry, I said. For that, for everything. I drummed my fingers lightly on the tablecloth, hoping she'd understand that I was reaching out to touch her, to offer her something deeper than words, something inexpressible, and yes, there was the faintest brush of her fingertips on the back of my hand. Mel, I'm just so, I said as the fork was stabbed through my hand and into the table. My head was filled with blinding light, the pain so intense and pure that I couldn't even scream. A glass rolled off the table and smashed on the floor. I don't remember much more. There must have been blood on the tablecloth, I suppose, but if Max knew this, then, well, like any good waiter, he didn't say anything. I suppose I must have taken my serviette to bind my hand. I do remember shoving it deep into my pocket as we shuffled out, my left hand on the shoulder of my assailant. She must have paid, and I don't remember what, if anything, was said in the cab on the way home. The damage to my hand wasn't all that bad. One bone chipped and not broken. I've lost a little movement in my middle finger. You can still just about see the scar. Anyway, we haven't talked about that night since. I doubt we ever will. It was all something that belonged to the darkness, something too painful to expose to the light. I'd like to believe it's over now, but I don't suppose I'll ever know for certain. In any case, I still love her. As a matter of fact, I think I love her more.